Hey everyone. So today we are reviewing the new Spider-Man, Spider-Man Homecoming, starring Tom Holland as Peter Parker, who is also Spider-Man, and Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. Now, first off, I just want to get this out of the way. I have a cold. I've had a cold all week, but I really want to do this review for you guys, so here it is. I'm just going to talk about just what I thought about the movie, okay? I saw this movie twice this week, and the first 2/3 of this movie are kind of slow, kind of a little boring. Like, I watched it last night with the family, and everyone was like, okay, this is boring. And I'm like, what do you mean it's boring? Like, come on, it's Spider-Man, like, let's get into it. And they're like, no, it's boring. I'm like, I promise you it gets better. And then they did get more engaged, and then they liked it. Final act of this movie is where the film finally picks up and gets rolling, but it takes so long to get there. So that's kind of a problem. Well, at least it's a problem for me. Tom Holland as Peter Parker and Spider-Man is kind of the Spider-Man that we need in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so I'll be using that term, MCU, as the video goes on. So Tom Holland is what we need in the MCU right now, and he's a good fit as Peter Parker and as Spider-Man. He's young. He's 15 years old, which is funny because he doesn't look 15. He looks like he's in his senior year of high school or college. Anyway, but this version of Spider-Man is totally different than the Andrew Garfield versions or the Tobey Maguire versions. It's new, it's fresh, it has a different take on Spider-Man. We don't have an origin story, it's just talked about that he got bitten by a radioactive spider, so we don't need a whole movie that's an origin story. Let's talk about the villain in this movie. The villain is played by Michael Keaton, and he did a really good job. The first time I watched it, I was like, yeah, I wish he was, like, really bad. I wanted him to play a villain like Red Skull or Venom or Doc Ock, but his villain was more actually relatable. So I found that interesting as well. Let's talk negative content in this movie. Now, Spider-Man is supposed to be like every kid's favorite superhero. It's either Superman, Batman, or Spider-Man. In this Spider-Man, we have a couple problems. There's the language used throughout the movie that could be considered offensive, and little children don't need to hear. There's some violence, which it never gets to the point where it's super threatening, but it's still violent, as you would expect from a Spider-Man movie, you know, fighting bad guys and whatnot. There's a couple suggestive remarks, but that's pretty much it for the negative content. Okay, so I covered the negatives, now I'll cover the positives. Are there any positives? I mean, it's entertaining, but that's the problem with this movie. This movie doesn't have much positive going on. He's always going behind people's backs, he's lying, and doing stuff that Tony Stark tells him not to do, and getting himself into trouble. Now, I hope in the next few movies that Peter Parker has learned his lesson not to do those things, but they didn't show in the movie that those things were necessarily wrong for him to do. So he's not exactly a good role model. I mean, he's not awful, but he's not Captain America, you know. So, that's what separates this movie from the Tobey Maguire movies, which will for always be my favorite Spider-Man movies, is that in those you really learn about good morals and about doing the right thing and the consequences of doing the wrong thing. And this movie doesn't really have that. With great power comes great responsibility. This movie doesn't really show that. It shows that he should have great responsibility, but he doesn't. Okay, so as a film itself, what I liked about it, the directing was really good. I liked the lighting in this movie and the coloring. Now, it was very vibrant, like a Guardians of the Galaxy was. Like, very, very alive feeling. So I liked that. I also did like Tom Holland as Peter Parker. He's just not my favorite. Tobey Maguire will always be my favorite. Andrew Garfield, can we just pretend those movies didn't happen? Please? I mean, they're still out there, but I watched both of them and I wasted 4 hours of my life. I liked how they used Tony Stark in this movie because he wasn't in it a lot. And he's kind of mentoring the kid, but he wasn't in the movie doing a lot of stuff, which was nice. And you see him more as Tony Stark than you see him as Iron Man. So, that was cool. I like all the Easter eggs that they hide in this movie. If you don't know the term Easter egg, it's where a film references another film or something they're going to do in the future. And this movie has a lot of them. So if you follow the MCU timeline and then you watch this movie, you get a lot. And that's kind of cool. I liked how it was filmed. There was no shaky cam. I liked the CGI. It was better than it was in Civil War. So that's an improvement. For this film, I would give it, for my personal enjoyment, I would give it probably a 7. I would definitely watch it again. You know, it's pretty family friendly, and if you want to, you know, sit down and just enjoy a movie, it's a good one to pick. It's definitely entertaining, and that's what this movie did get right. It is entertaining, although it's slow and a little boring. There are parts that are boring, but it does entertain you. Now, as a film and how well it was done, I would probably give it like an 8 or 9. It's just lacking in character development and story a little bit. So those are my thoughts on the movie. Do your research first, in case there's any negative content that I didn't cover that you wouldn't want to watch or your family to watch. And don't take this as a recommendation to watch the film, as always. So that about covers it for the movie Spider-Man Homecoming, and I hope to get some new reviews up soon, and thank you guys for watching. Goodbye. It stars what's his name as what's his name, and what's his name as what's his name. Let me start over. Research the movie yourself before you watch it, in case there's make sure you do. Oh my goodness. He was a bad guy, but I got distracted looking at a fly on the wall. Anyway, him to be like Red Skull or like Venom or Dr. Ock, the Bus Oct. You know, with great responsibility comes great responsibility. Wait, I said that wrong. With great power.